Tonight, across the country, a patchwork of reopenings.
I'm pretty excited to get out of the house after 2 months.
For many, it's a weekend of cautiously getting back to business and having fun.
Sunsplash Water Park is now open.
In New Orleans, restaurants and retail shops now open. Appointment only, 25% capacity.
Thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate
thanks for having me. No worries.
Like I said before, most of the people that I have had on have been kind of in the photography space, but I also, like, as you may remember, because I've been like following you and messaging you for like years, travel has always been a huge thing for me. And I suppose that's somewhat synonymous with photography and landscape and cityscape photography that I do. And I really wanted to start getting some more, travel career type of people on that are inspiring to me, or I think are cool, or whatever. Especially given the obvious, like everything that's going on right now, and just, we're just in an insane time right now. And I really wanted to get like sort of from the horse's mouth, like from you, like, what do you think about all this? How is this affecting you right now? What's your outlook? Just, I want to hit on all that kind of stuff. And I'm
Cool.
super curious what you think.
Cool. Let me just grab my water, then I'm good to go.
Cool. What are things like in London at the moment? Are people kind of starting to get out more? I feel like it's probably somewhat similar to what's going on in the US.
Yeah, for sure. I think, the feeling, and let me know when we're rolling. Versus
We're
just
up.
chatting.
Yeah, we're going.
Okay, cool. So the feeling in London, I would say, is very mixed. People, in one way, of course, myself included, are very respectful and mindful of everything that's happening. And, there's an element that you don't want to negatively impact somebody else, but there's also this side of it where, that lots of things in the world do need to move in some way or another. And Boris, the prime minister here, kind of botched things like in an announcement last week, which, if anything, made people not take it as seriously as they should anymore. But, the world has to get back to some kind of level of normalcy at some point, whatever that new normal may be. And I think people here are just kind of hopeful now. I heard they're down to like 23 new cases in London. It's expected to be cutting third every 7 days or something, if the rate continues. So like, if that happens, then we'd pretty much, fingers crossed, nearly be out of the woods. And we're really hoping that happens, because people want to go places, they want to do things,
Right. Yeah. Make money, for that matter.
Yeah. Everybody needs to make a living somehow. And travel is a big part of that. I think roughly 10% of Europe's entire GDP is travel. And there's more than 270 million people in Europe whose jobs are intimately linked to travel. So I would say that's fairly important down the line whenever it's deemed safe again,
Yeah, for sure. So, I take it that the majority of the stuff that you've been doing lately on your blog and website and everything has to do with just, what is your opinion on this whole thing? I mean, obviously no one's really traveling right now. And I would imagine that the priority people are facing on how can I fly for free or very little is kind of like an afterthought, at least for the near future, I would assume.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, in terms of like booking cash tickets, there's very little an airline can do right now other than an incredible deal to make you interested in travel. But for people who have points and who like collecting points, it's actually a pretty amazing time, because while nobody's looking, you can book just about anything you want. So all these kind of things that people who usually the knock on points is, oh, well, you can never use them when you want, or never in this cabin or to that place. And right now, like all those kind of what we would typically call unicorns, which don't usually exist, are widely available and people are booking them. And that doesn't mean travel now. That means like travel for next year. But while airlines are down but not out, they're just like opening the floodgates on what you can book and everything. So it's in a way, it's a very weird time, because some people are taking advantage. Other people have completely tuned out, but our readership, if anything, has been up, just because it's such a weird time of, this country's closing, this country's opening, this airline's going out of business, this other airline is doing this crazy thing. And, it's every day I keep wanting, it's like, be careful what you wish for thing. I keep wanting to be like furloughed, so I can just do nothing
Right.
and get paid. But it doesn't really work well in my profession. So I'm just cracking along every day, and every day seems to just be a roller coaster all day.
Interesting. So you find that the amount of stuff that you've been doing has gone up as a result of these sort of like all of these, I guess, slipping through the crack type of opportunities that maybe are they like glitches, like website glitches, or what are the things that you're seeing right now?
Well, mostly it's just that, when there's I don't know how much you care about loyalty programs, but generally when business is good, like when lots of people are traveling, airlines, hotels, they don't care about loyalty programs. When business is bad, they do. So whereas they've kind of fobbed off all their members for years saying you can't travel on this date with your points and you can't stay here with your points, now they're just like, just get anybody to book. We don't care how they're paying. And so all these opportunities exist. And then Qatar, then like as far as cash goes, like Qatar Airways had this crazy thing over the last few days where they were trying to get new cash bookings. So they said you can book any ticket and then you could move it to anywhere within 5,000 miles of your destination that you booked for free. And that
I saw
nuts.
You post that. That is odd, because it's almost like why have regions? You know what I mean? Why have like designated regions if you can infiltrate that?
And it meant you could book something that was cheap to one place, then immediately switch it for something 4 or 5 times more expensive to another place with no additional charge. So like I could book, let's say, Europe to Asia and then immediately switch it to Australia for a ticket which would be twice as expensive, or US to Ukraine and then switch that to the Maldives. So people were going wild with that, and I think they had to shut it down today. But
oh, really? So I wonder what the logic was then, if they thought, hey, this is a great idea, and then, oh wait, I was wrong, it's a bad idea. Like, where does
I think the idea was they made the money they needed to make. They're like the only airline in the world actually bringing money in at a time when nobody else was. So they were just like, we'll take it. And maybe the money tap filled up quicker than they thought, and they had to close the spigot. So.
Right. I wonder how much it has to do with just like staying relevant, like good PR, just putting your name out there,
I think that's a thing. I absolutely think that's a thing. And that's going to be the way forward for a lot of airlines and hotels. People don't care about travel right now. How do you get them to care again? I think it's going to come down to good marketing, good promotions, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. I keep wondering if, as a result of like people not really caring as much about travel, if like, what does this end up turning into? Like, what does this whole thing look like a year or two from now? And obviously, if anyone who knows that is, the next billionaire, but like, I have to assume that with travel, it's going to become more and more of like a luxury item. Like it might've been, say like 40, in like the 60s or something, where it was like, if you're flying internationally, you're some, like Mad Men style, executive or something. It's like, I kind of see things maybe not quite there, but like moving in that direction. Cause like, how can you afford to just have this mass production of travel anymore,
Yeah, you're spot on. I actually recently wrote about that. I said there's like a new era of classism coming to travel, and I think it's going to be a lot like the Titanic, not just without the ice, but like you've got the people with the mother of pearl caviar spoons up top, and they're socially distanced, and their tuxedos with their footmen, and then down below you've got the people who are just like, I need to go somewhere, and I just need to go somewhere, and I can't socially distance, and because I can't afford to, and it's going to suck. So
right.
It's a shame. And that's extending beyond like the actual transportation, even to the point of destinations are saying, we don't really want cruise passengers anymore because cruise passengers don't contribute to the local economy. So whereas cruising was a kind of economically friendly way for people to get into travel, now lots of destinations are saying, look, you guys come onto our island for 12 hours, you buy 1 bottle of water and you go stuff your face at your buffet on board, sleep on board. What are the people getting out of this? Like, why are we doing this? And so they're going to start to focus on more internet, like overnight visitors, and kind of like the luxury travel market, because they want more quality, let's say, that's their, per visitor, like what's coming in, how's that benefiting the local community? Because obviously travel has been proven to have risks now. I think everything in life has risks. Like I'm not afraid to travel. I'm probably going to be traveling in 3 weeks. But it's just that thing where they want more for that risk of letting people into their community, and lots of cruises and kind of budget accommodations just aren't going to cut it anymore, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would imagine that, like, I think that there's also that whole stigma about travel, and like, you hear about it with like, everyone's got to go take their stupid cliche Instagram shot from like wherever the, the location is in a particular area. And, like you hear about it with the, what are the fields in France that like everyone's like stepping all over the, was it lilacs, I think?
Yeah. Lavender usually.
Or lavender. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And then there's like the tulip fields in the Netherlands. And there, there's all these places that like everyone's always complaining about. And then you hear stuff about, like right now you hear about, the Venetian canals are so clear. And like, there's all this like result of like lack of pollution. And it just feels like this is one of those things where, in addition to what you're talking about with like the cruise lines and sort of locals being like, why the hell are we doing this anymore? I would imagine that any of these places that understand that their like ecology is a big asset for them as well are probably gonna want to, trim down on like the amount of people coming there as well, unless maybe it's a few that are paying a lot, because it's like we have so much to lose here by having millions upon millions of people
and
that
for
don't
them,
care.
Their whole draw is their natural environment, lots of these places. So if you ruin that, you take like the Philippines, for example, they had to shut down Boracay for a long time because people quite literally ruined that beach. It became, and like was actually toxic. So they had to completely shut down travel. And now it's much more kind of curated and far fewer people get to see it. And so if these destinations actually, rely on that for future security and livelihood, you can't just crush it by having a few people come in and go wild for a few years. It's like, the kind of farms that lend themselves to music festivals and then never ever recover. It's
right.
Like, there's a cost to it all. So I think, what we'll see is lots of little new taxes, lots of little new surcharges, fees, whatever, added to a lot of the trips that you would traditionally take. So that's why I think a lot of people, typically pretty smart people, think that regional travel is going to come back much sooner than international travel. But I do believe that international travel will also come back much sooner than most people think too. Yeah.
Yeah. I would imagine that the international component to it is really just going to be based on like, where are you coming from? I would think. So like if I'm a head of state for some country that coronavirus is relatively non-issue, I'm looking at like the US and I'm being like, I don't know how much I really want these fuckers coming in here. You know what I mean? Yeah. Whereas like if I'm looking at, I don't know, some other populated and wealthy country that it's not so bad, I'm thinking, well, yeah, like let's get those people in here first.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like Europe is looking at kind of for like a crawl and walk approach of let's have, European passport holders come in first. And even before we kind of open up travel, generally on June 15th, like if like two countries with similar experiences dealing with this want to have travel between them, they can agree to do that on their own little deal. So I think that's kind of the initial way forward. And, maybe you'll see that with like the US and Canada or the US and Mexico or something like that. But then Iceland is saying that Americans can come from June 15th. So I think a lot of people are pretty stoked about that.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's insane or whether that's like the greatest news ever, but basically my thing is Greece and Iceland are the two countries, and Austria arguably as well, are the ones saying like, let's go for it. There's a lot to gain here. And if we can show that travel is safe again, we'll be the first to benefit. And for me personally, I'm just really hoping it works out. Like I'm so hopeful that they don't have second waves and they avoid big spikes, and that the travel experience doesn't get such a knock. Like, because obviously there's probably going to be a cheek swab now to make sure, like, to test you either before you fly or when you land, and more formalities going through borders, which are never fun anyway. They weren't fun before this, so they're not going to be. But like, I also think there's a point where, if you tell me I can go see like the amazing glaciers or waterfalls in Iceland, like I'm going to go. Like if I have to wait 2 hours in the lobby while they like deliver my result, it's a small price to pay for an incredible, unforgettable travel experience. So
yeah, it's a good point. I mean, the idea of dealing with all that stuff, cheek swab and all this other crap, when you're going to like, Gary, Indiana, maybe that's more of a deal breaker than if I'm like had this lifetime trip planned to Iceland and I'm like so excited. Oh, a cheek swab? Well, fuck it. Who cares? It's like most of the time that people travel to say a third world country or one in which I'm going to go and get a passport just so that I can travel to this particular place. Like it's such a huge thing for them that you're right. Like adding another hour or two of inconvenience relative to the inconvenience and logistics of putting it all together to begin with is really, kind of a non-issue. That's true.
The problem is the discretionary travel where like, okay, so that's a lifelong trip we're talking about, but the one that's like, oh, there's a really good deal to Paris. Do you want to go next week? And that's like, well, I don't really know if I want to deal with all that hassle just for like a long weekend, which was the way things were going. So people were getting super excited about those kind of like what could happen with a long weekend. I wrote lots of things about, how easy it was to do things like transatlantic trips with a long weekend because you fly overnight and you fly back during the day and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think that's going to happen nearly as much. And it's going to be a new form of travel where there are those like bigger trips that people focus on and perhaps not as frequently.
Yeah, it's a good point. And it also, back to what you're saying before about like, Iceland and Greece kind of being these two countries that have opened up the quickest. It makes me wonder, like, just the differences between people across cultures and things like, do Iceland and Greece look at this thing from a purely financial, like risk versus reward perspective? And that's it. They're like, well, hey, if we can get 3 times the tourism here because they don't have any place else to go, maybe that's what they're thinking. Then we can win. Or I wonder if it's like almost more of like a cultural thing, like just it's a reflection on the Icelandic people or the Greek people and kind of how they just look at the world. And, it's a really interesting subject, I think.
It is for sure, because both of them actually did really well in tackling it in the first place. Like they've had super low counts in Greece. They had hardly any cases at all in Iceland. So it's not like they were taking a very laissez-faire approach and letting people run wild with this, like some other countries, which went off the charts and the wrong way. Like they took it very seriously, but they also, I think, believe they learned enough from that and know how badly their economies will forever be impacted if they don't change the way things are going, that they're like, we got to, and that I think that's the conversation that isn't very popular, but is starting to become more talkable or discussable. Of like, eventually people will start dying from lack of economic opportunity.
Right.
And COVID will be the least of their problems. In Greece, more than, I believe, 25% of the entire population works in tourism. So that's like 1 in 4 people who have no access to, income if something doesn't happen. And
right.
That's not a trend you really want to start to set, especially if all the leading health experts now are saying there may never be a vaccine.
Right.
But if you do wash your hands and you do wear a mask and you do stay the fuck away from people around you, then there's a very good chance that we'll all be fine, and that this will die out seasonally and, if we're lucky, maybe never come back. Who knows? Like SARS doesn't come around again. And just a quick tangent, like I was corrected in something I wrote this week. I was saying like, I effectively wrote that if you say no travel till there's a vaccine, you're not being realistic, with the caveat that, of course, if you do have a pre-existing condition or at risk, of course, I feel for you and I understand your position. But for everybody else, like, it's just unrealistic because there still isn't a vaccine for SARS. SARS was very, very bad, but it phased out. And so I said, oh, there's no vaccine for SARS. And somebody corrected me and they said, well, there were 2 that were in development, but then the virus just disappeared. So nobody even cared about vaccines anymore. So it'll be very interesting to see which one comes first. But
Yeah. The vaccine subject is really a funny one as well, because if you're watching any of the news and as far as the US goes, it's like there seemed to be this very bought into idea, right off the bat, which I think was Fauci said it. And by the way, I like Fauci. I think most of the stuff he says seems very reasonable. Yeah. But I remember it was like, yeah, we're looking at a 12 to 18 month timeline for a vaccine. And then I started listening to a bunch of other epidemiologists and immunologists, and they were kind of like, dude, 12 to 18 months would be amazing.
That'd be the best ever case.
Yeah, right. And a lot of these guys have said dude, this could take like 5 years, it might never happen. Like there might never actually be one. And I just find it interesting that in a lot of cases in the US, they've kind of gone from like a flatten the curve model to like we're just going to hide until the vaccine comes. And I'm not necessarily saying that one side is right or wrong on that issue, but it to me, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to put all of your eggs in the basket of there's going to be a vaccine in a year, because according to a lot of people, and I'm not talking about, 40-year-old living in your mom's basement, tinfoil hat wearing people. I'm talking like scientists that are out there going, I don't know that we can trust this 12 to 18 month thing. And so if you base everything on that, it just seems a little silly to just assume everything from that,
Yeah, people say this is unprecedented. In many ways it is, but you can always draw from history and how people have dealt with previous pandemics, from Ebola to SARS. And again, like there's no consensus as to what's going to happen here. It might just phase out naturally. It may be around forever, and we'll be talking in 20 years on this podcast about how we're still going, like they're still trying to crack it. But
right,
and for a lot of people, for a lot of cultures, for a lot of countries, they kind of have to go for it. And it seems that many people now agree that if they're opening their borders, there's nothing ethically wrong with going to open them, or going into them, because they've made that choice. And frankly, they would probably like you to come. So.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think that the people that are more like angry by one thing or another, I think a lot of it just has to do with whatever their perspective is, whatever their career is, and that sort of thing. So like it's probably pretty easy for somebody to poo-poo the idea of opening up when maybe they're in a situation that it's a lot easier for them to kind of wait it out. Whereas, like I've reached out to a few people. I don't know if you remember any of our previous conversations, but I've always had like a vested, interest in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. I've been going there ever since I was a kid. I've been there like 9 times, and for like safari, and I've just got this weird obsession with like off the beaten path stuff.
Good place to be obsessed with.
Yeah, I suppose. But that's kind of always been my thing. And so I'm actually trying to get a few of those people on the podcast. But, as far as tourism goes, like, I don't know what the hell, like the safari industry does about something like this, because, it was I would imagine a pretty profitable industry, although difficult to actually get the masses to do it. You know what I mean? It's not something it's not the first vacation that people tend to reach for. And I think you add into the fact that a lot of people are A, not going to travel, and B, I think a lot of the people that go on safari are actually relatively elderly. I think a lot of people, it's like, this was their bucket list thing. This is
the big trip for them. This is, the one.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, having gone there so many times, it's like, I've been on these like safari vehicles with like 7 other people in like their 70s. And I always felt like, this is just kind of funny. I'm like the young person here. And I feel for them, and I don't know what the hell they're going to do about something like this. I think a lot of places are probably going to go out of business there. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do, my heart feels for those guys.
Yeah, mine too, because, obviously the unfortunate thing about this is it's not like it's a great job market in every other industry and they're just going to find a new career tomorrow and start coding websites for,
right.
Google or something like that. It's just not how it works. Everybody's hurting. So, and I think the thing is that people say it's very easy to distance yourself from travel when you think of travel as like airlines, trains, planes, whatever, hotels. But, travel is your local coffee shop. Travel is, like a lot of the businesses in your town, restaurants, everything. They depend on foot traffic and movement of people. Most cities wouldn't exist at all the way they do without the buzz and the movement of people. So even on a domestic level, if business travel dies, you'll have lots and lots of restaurants and bars that you care about that will die.
Oh, for sure.
And so I think it's all fun and games to people to hypothesize about these things until it hits home and they're like, oh, I love Sloppy Joe's or whatever it is, the place and where I go for my wings, and then they're like, oh shit, I guess it is kind of a big deal,
Yeah. Is that your spot, Sloppy Joe's?
No, I've never been. There's one in my town, but
okay.
It just sounds like a place people would go to, especially
yeah, right.
in America.
Right. Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, man. In fact, my wife and I were picking up some takeout yesterday, and as we were driving through this shopping center near our house, I was going, imagine it's 2 years from now. Which one of these restaurants is not going to be there? And the thing that we seemed to agree on was basically all of like the non-chain kind of spots. We're like, I mean, how, like, because this is like a high rent sort of shopping center. And I'm like,
yeah,
the restaurant industry, as everybody knows, is like very small margin. I mean, it's funny because like, I think a lot of restaurateurs, they own some thriving restaurant. Like you assume that this person's like super, super wealthy. But I think in terms of like annual salary that they pay themselves, I don't really think that they make that much money. I think that they're putting money into an asset, which is, that is worth a lot. But I think in terms of just what did they make that they put in their pocket relative to how nice this place is actually relatively low. So, I'm just picturing these places that pay this huge rent, and where, I guess restaurants are kind of always struggling to begin with. It's a low margin. How does a restaurant go, oh, cool, we'll just have half the amount of tables here so that we can encourage social? Like, I don't think that works unless everyone just charges twice. It's like,
it's kind of that point of classism in travel again. Like either they'll just start charging double and restaurants will become a thing that only well-off people can go to, and everybody else just eats freezer meals, and like,
right.
Who knows? But like if that's the only way to go forward, then surely they have to make more money elsewhere. Whether that means charging 5x instead of 3x for wine bottles, like,
right.
We'll find out. But
right.
it's not pretty, that's for sure.
No. And I even think that even a lot of the people that probably could afford it are still going to look at it as like, dude, I just want a fucking bagel with cream cheese. Like, I don't want to spend $24 on a bagel with cream. Like, this should be $2, And I
don't get me started, man. Living in Europe, like the cost of living here is so low compared to living in the States. I was born and raised in New York. I spent my entire life up until 3 years ago, basically in New York. And what it costs me to do basically anything here is a fraction of what it costs to do basically anything in America.
Really? Even in London?
100%.
I did not I always assumed London was a quite an expensive, maybe not New York, but an expensive city anyway.
You go to a really high-end restaurant, like not 3 Michelin stars, but like a place that you would consider like a buzzy Friday night upscale place. And the most you're looking to pay on any menu is like 22, 23 pounds for like a main course, like 10, 20. So like, and wine is a fraction of the price. It's people generally make less money here. So that is an important consideration. Mm-hmm. But if you're getting paid in like US dollars or have like a decent salary, the coffee is £2.50 here for like a very nice flat white with the alternative hipster oat milk and all the good, the good fixins, which I like.
Yeah.
And, but like I go to the US and I have like, I'll have a, latte with oat milk. That'll be $5, and I'll have a croissant $5. I'm like, fucking hell, like,
Yep.
There's only so much like, so yeah. It's an interesting one. Like, and like pints, for example, people get pissed if a pint is more than like 3 pounds at a bar. Like they're like,
of something decent.
Yeah. Good pint, like nice beer. Like, London, you might push 5 pounds, and people will complain. They'll be like, oh, it's 5 pounds a pint, and they're pretty disgusted, but that's London. But like, if you go at all outside of the cities, like super cheap. Whereas I felt like every time I was in New York, I never found a beer under $10 when I was anywhere. So
yeah. New York is
happy hour.
Any like tourism place in New York too. Is like when you go to there, like you go to one of those like top of the hub kind of places, like, oh, let's go to the View. And it's like, you get that, I remember I did that once with my wife. We went up to the one in Boston just for like some, like our 11th date or something. And like, yeah, we'll just go get a couple drinks. And it was like $70 for like, 2 rounds or something. It's like, this is insane. Yeah. That is funny. I didn't realize that was the case about London. I assumed that it was probably just as expensive as New York.
Well, like London more than most of Europe, but then, both would fit into cheaper than the US for food costs generally.
Right. Is that also the case with going to sporting events? Because that's where they really kill you. here.
Yeah, interesting fact. So like, for example, with the Premier League, like they basically limit, there is no kind of StubHub secondary market. You have, if you want to get tickets to a game, you have to join one of the clubs, fan clubs, basically. It's like my in-laws tend to support Tottenham Hotspur. And so like you have to join the Spurs fan club. I don't know, it's like £20 or something for Spurs membership. But then you have access to like whatever tickets are still going, and ticket prices are very low compared, like nobody's paying like 2,000 for courtside seats. Of course, there's a luxury market, there's boxes, but like the average dude going to a game is still in like the low 20, 30, 40, 50 for, you know, a top level major league event. Whereas I stopped even looking at how much it costs to go to games in the US. So
yeah, that's unbelievable.
You know, yeah, it's pretty cool. I think, you know, they basically they care more about who's going, like in terms of being actual fans than just general market sales. So
totally,
it has its pluses and minuses, but I generally think it's a very good system of allocating tickets to people.
Yeah, that's very cool. I wish tickets were that accessible here. I mean, yeah, I feel like if you go to I mean, there are some sports, I guess, that aren't as expensive. Like baseball isn't that bad. Baseball is probably kind of more on par with what you were just saying, as far as you know, European football.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you know, American football is just it's so outrageous. I mean, like first of all, they sell out immediately, and they always go to the season ticket holders. So like. Yeah. I'll give you an example. So like for the Eagles, Philadelphia Eagles, I don't know why I keep saying this as if you're not from the US. You've been in Europe long enough to where I like assume I'm the American here or something. Yeah, like for Eagles tickets, it's like you get in a line to be a season ticket holder. And I think I signed up like forever ago, like 10 years ago. I was like, I'll join the waiting list, and it's going to take forever because I think it's like a 99.9% retention rate year over year. Yep. So like no one's losing their tickets. And so maybe, you know, 6 months ago or something, I was like, oh, you know what? I wonder where my place in line is. And I was like, I think I was still like 70,000th in line or something like that. And so I did the math on the retention rate. I was like, cool, I'll get my tickets in like 315 years or something like that.
Yep.
So
yep. Like the Packers are even worse from what I've heard.
Probably. Well, you know, that's like their team.
Yeah, they live for
Green Bay. That's it.
God, what else are you going to do in the winter? Like,
right. So,
sorry.
So they have these like seat licenses now, you know, where you can essentially, you just buy the seat license, and you basically skip the line. So someone who's a season ticket holder says, here, you can just have my season tickets. Now you still have to buy the tickets at the beginning of each season, but this gives you the right to actually buy those tickets. And I mean, they'll sell, depending upon where, you know, it could be anywhere between 5 and like 25,000 per seat just for the seat license. And then you go, great, I spent $10K for like the worst seats in the stadium. Now at the beginning of the season, I can spend like $2,500 and buy my tickets.
Yep. Madness.
Yeah, it really is bananas. But anyway, that's my rant about American sport costs, I guess. So, dude, I was curious, man. Like, I think everybody has a reason for getting into travel, especially people like you, who's like, that is what you do. And I'm just wondering, like, you know, I have my stories. Like, how did you get the bug? You know, what happened? Was it like you were a kid and you went somewhere? Like, what happened?
Yeah, I think it, like most people, does start somewhere in your childhood where you go somewhere or see something that you're like, wow, that is very cool. I would like to see more things like that I didn't know were real. You know, I think for me, it was something as simple as like going to the Bahamas and seeing the water from the plane and thinking it looked like one giant swimming pool and being like, damn, okay, that's really cool. Like, is there anywhere else like this? And then it's like, yes, the answer is yes. There are lots of places like this and you should go see them. And sometimes they're waterfalls, sometimes they're epic jagged mountains. And, you know, and once you start that, I think you do become very addicted to that entire process of like, okay, I've been here, this is cool, but is this other place cooler? I've heard this other place is cooler. And you just kind of, from there, it just snowballs. I think I definitely had some transformative trips. Like I was a tennis player as a kid, and I went to Australia and New Zealand just before 2001. And like, from going up in the cockpit during the flight, back when you could do that kind of stuff, to seeing like, Waiheke Island and like the, North Island of New Zealand and Sydney and all that stuff. I was like, holy hell, like this is so cool, And from there, I literally signed up for a loyalty program. I think when I was 12 years old, I saw it on a napkin on a plane. It was like, sign up for Delta Sky Miles and one day you could fly for free. And I was like, that sounds like something for me. And that kind of, I think the obsession just went a little bit nuts from there.
Yeah.
Now we're here and I make a living running a free travel website. So,
right. Yeah. So weird, man, how that works out. But, like it's, I have a kind of a similar story. When I was a kid, my dad traveled a ton, to the point where eventually we like went to, I said Africa. We went to Africa. We flew on Swiss Air at the time. This was back in like 90, 93 or 94 or 95, something like that. And we flew to Zurich, and then from Zurich to, I think it was Johannesburg, and then Johannesburg to Harare, Zimbabwe via Air Zimbabwe. But the point is we went first class, and I think at the time, like it was a different game a little bit back then. So it was like he had to pay, $10 or whatever for some whatever fee they tacked on, but it was like nothing. And then we did that like, 4 or 5 times in a row. And so then like, years went by and I hadn't done that in a long time. And so then when I got married, I was like, oh, I should figure out how to just like accrue some miles. And so then the obsession kind of began for me to be like, I know that this can be done and people do it. My father did it when I was a kid. So like, I'm going to try to do it now.
Yeah. There's usually always something like that where it's like a marriage, somebody you want to make happy, or a flight that's so long that you do not want to fly in economy. So you're trying to find a way out. It's like, there's usually that kind of impetus somewhere along the line for somebody to jump in head first. Like
for sure. It's kind of like that Seinfeld episode where Jerry and Elaine are fighting for who gets the first class upgrade. And Jerry says to Elaine, like, yeah, but I've been up there. You don't know what you're missing. Like, it's going to be way worse for me.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's totally it, because it's like, I think you're right. For most people, the perspective of like, flying like 12 or more hours cramped with your shoulder touching some guy. Yeah. I mean, just,
especially now.
Right. Yeah. Especially now. And so I went, crazy and I figured it all out. But I think what really hit me was the realization that I could do it. So it was the research. Yeah. And then once I booked the flight and once we took the flight and I was like, yeah, like I lost a few hours of sleep over this and like researching stuff. But in reality, like it wasn't that hard. And I pulled it off and it was like, well, let's just do it again, And then I went to Africa the next year. And then we went to Southeast Asia the next year. And all of which,
especially in the US, where like one card bonus basically gets you enough points to do something cool. Elsewhere in the world, it's not that easy, and you do need to fly a lot and you need to spend a lot. But in the US, it's like find one credit card that you really like that sounds good for you, and boom, like you're halfway there. Get one more, and you're round trip doing something sick. It's like it's a tough proposition to beat, and lots of people make use of it. So I think there's always that, like, is it that good? Yes, if you do it right, it is that good, and it's superb. And I've had some of the best experiences of my life, and not paid for them, by
right. Yeah. I keep telling my photographer friends, even some of the guys that have been on the podcast. I had this guy Michael Shainbloom, who's like a really well-known landscape cityscape guy. He travels constantly because he does workshops in like all these other countries. And it was like, in fact, that was kind of the idea, to be like, I should see if maybe Gilbert wants to come on this podcast, was because he was just talking about, like, we got into like the Chase reserve card when that came out and how bananas that was. And and he was like, yeah, man, I don't pay for any flights anymore. I just do this. And I was like, dude, you need to be like an ambassador for the photography community. Be like, all you guys that are like, I'd really love to go to Hawaii to get this iconic shot. It's like, bro, you can do it. It's not that you don't have to pay, $1,500. Like, you just find a way,
Absolutely. I think, like we said, you need that want to get you into it, but then once you've had that want, it's all about realizing that it's not actually that complicated, especially now, and just start simple, people kind of go wild thinking, but what about this and that? It's like, just have that. I always say to people, like, get that first easy win. Like, it doesn't have to be the most exotic, amazing thing ever. Just prove to yourself that, like, you get points, then you cash them in for something that you want, prove that it can be done, and then you can like go nuts and devote 24 hours of your day to reading forums and joining Facebook groups that discuss all the promotions of the minute and following sites like mine and putting money in my pocket. And,
yeah, of course, always the end goal. Yeah, man, it is so true. Like, just the act of accomplishing it, even if it's like a fairly small trip, is like the light bulb to be like, oh, what the hell have I been doing the last 20 years? Like, why haven't I been doing this the whole time? It really is like that. And I see it with a lot of people that I talk to about this, because I consider myself somewhat of a missionary of this kind of thing. It's like, dude, like, I'm not, a billionaire. Like, this isn't that hard. And you see, it's kind of hard to sell people on it a lot of the time. You can kind of see where they're like, oh yeah, like, that's cool. And it's like, I'm not penetrating into your skull right now, because if I was, you would be more excited about it. And it's
the funny thing is, when you end up on the same flight as those people and they're like, damn, really? Nice seat. I'm like, it's not because I'm rich. It's because I earned the points. All these things I've been telling you to do for years that you could be getting in on. Yeah, totally. I mean, even someone like my best friend usually is like the click moment where they're like, oh shit, maybe we should do this. Like, right. When you go back to coach and give them some of your food or something. Yeah, exactly. Like, even some of my best friends, I've just been like twisting their arm forever. And I've gotten a couple of them to at least like get out a credit card or two and be like, listen, dude, everything, just start here. Everything that you spend money on, just spend money on this. Yeah. Just spend the money. Don't be the asshole that buys the huge TV that you don't need. It's not about, it's like, that's the evil of credit cards that I think people can't move past, is like, dude, it's not about getting a bunch of crap. It's just like, just regular spending habits, put it on this. And in 2 years, I can almost guarantee you're going to have enough to go somewhere. Yeah. The simplest way I always try to describe it to people is, pretend that your credit card is a debit card and that you only can spend the money that you would have in your checking account, and if you approach it like that, you never lose, because you're just earning points without paying for them. And you keep doing it and you keep doing it. And now you can earn like $5 per dollar. So you buy a flight that's $1,000, you have 5,000 points. And you go to a meal and it's $100, you can have 500 points. And they're just everywhere. There's never been a better time, particularly now, like I said in the beginning, where you actually can redeem them when you want, where you want, because airlines and hotels are so desperate. Right. So you think even that's still the case for like a complete non-revenue ticket, like an airline still just whatever, just put bodies in seats. They don't even care. 100%. Like, flights that you'd never ever be able to find using points, like purely using points, are available right now. Whether it's like from the US to Australia, which is never available, or, London in peak summer or whatever, like they're all there in every cabin, and smart people are snapping them up. So if you're listening to this, be a smart person. If you have points, and if you don't have points, probably a good time to jump into that. Right. And they're even letting you still book out like you don't have to take the trip in 3 weeks or something. March, April next year. Like that's what we've been focusing on. Like, by we, I mean me, the royal we. But like, that's what I've been focusing on with the things I've been writing about is, most people aren't super interested in 2020 travel. If they are, it's for the end of the year, but lots of people are interested in like, February, March, April, 2021. And so that's where I've been talking a lot about what's out there and good flight deals you can book with cash or points, and same for hotels. Right. So do you suppose that I could understand, like the countries wanting to get people in there for tourism purposes, but I guess, so the airline who essentially isn't going to make money on something like a non-revenue type of ticket, does it get back to that whole idea of branding? It's like, we just need people with their smiling faces in our seats, or because they do make money. You have to understand they do make money. So, a non-rev to me is one of their employees who's traveling on a staff travel ticket. That's like actually non-rev. To me, somebody paying miles, those miles were accrued at some cost. So if you had an Amex Platinum card and you transferred the points to Virgin Atlantic, Virgin got a dollar figure for those points. You know, if you, you know, if you have a Delta Sky Miles American Express card, Delta's getting a percentage of every transaction that you're making on that swipe fee that the credit card company gets. And any revolving debt, they're getting a portion of that too. They make billions every year from the credit card program. So even though you're not actually exchanging real money at the time, like the cost for the airline, you know, they got something for it. Same with the hotel program. Like, you know, if you're spending on a Hyatt credit card, Hyatt's getting money from that. If you're, you know, transferring your points from Chase to Hyatt, Chase is paying Hyatt. And so it might not be as much as they would love, like in cash, but it's still something and can be a considerable amount depending on a variety of factors, which we could go down a very long rabbit hole. But
right. But essentially they're making money off the back end, usually from the credit card.
Yeah. And, you know, most people have some cost in acquiring points, and they're making money on every one of those transactions. Yeah.
Dude, by the way, one of the reasons that I thought you'd be cool to have on is because, like, I know that, and I know this has like been a thing for you because I see you having these little like bickering, things here and there. But you know, it's like I know that there are like points bloggers out there that are so in bed with credit card companies, and you know, the affiliate link thing is so enormous for them. And you have to wonder, and I'm sure in your case, you've probably been, you know, you've caught them like red-handed. But I think for the average person, at the very least, they're kind of going, how much of the information that I'm getting has been, you know, politicked in some way to where this is not exactly, you know, maybe it's beneficial, but it might still not be ideal, something like that. And I've always felt like you know, we're not that guy. Like, you were the guy who's like, look, like, I'm telling you the stuff that I would do myself. And
thank you. That's accurate, because I've always treated it as, you know, I value readers in the way that, like, if somebody bullshits me, I'm never coming back. And so if I think that something I've told someone doesn't check out, and then they go do something based on my recommendation and they get screwed, to me, I would never expect for that person to come back. And for me, it's always been about longevity and scale and getting into kind of the millions of monthly users. And so that, you know, we can not be aggressive in how we make money, but just make lots of tiny little bits of money over time. Whereas credit cards, I'll just off the top of my head, like, if somebody signs up for a credit card through an affiliate link, that blog could get up to like $300+ per card per person. So if you have a lot of traffic and you have lots of people, every single person is, you know, a huge potential transaction.
Right.
Sometimes when there's an amazing offer, like when, like you were saying, when Chase Sapphire Reserve came out and it was 100,000 point bonus and all this, like, who cares if the guy's getting paid off the recommendation, because it's an unequivocally great opportunity. Like there's just, it's amazing, and you don't have to sell it. It sells itself.
Right.
But it's those lean times, like right now, where you see some sites pushing cards which you've never heard of before, because there's no reason for you to hear of them, but they're the few cards that are actually still offering commission right now, because most cards are in kind of hibernation because they're not taking on new signups, or they're not trying to get, you know, incentivize new signups. So a lot of the kind of big premium cards aren't paying out right now, but some of these like wonky things that you should never have in your wallet are like getting lots of play on a very, very, very popular blog.
Yes.
At the
I
moment.
know the one that in which you refer to. I've have they ever, like, you know, come back to any of the stuff that you've said? Like, has there ever been any kind of, or is it just sort of like, I'm seeing him like saying this stuff about us, you know,
this is a funny one. I have to give into this, because basically Brian Kelly, like the guy who started the Points Guy.
Yep.
I wind him up like few people in the world wind him up, because I'm everything he hates, and he is pretty much many of the things that I don't admire either. And so it got to the point where I'd take these shots on Twitter, and he would love to come back at me from their official account and be like, hey, you know, I'm very proud of our 200 people and our 10 million users. I'm like, dude, I'm one person and I have more than 1 million. Does that mean one of me is equal to 20 of you? Like, and we'd get into these arguments that didn't always put necessarily either of us in the best light, but I generally found that he had much more skin to lose than I did.
100%.
And quite often I would kind of catch him out on something that didn't really vibe well with their multi-billion-dollar parent company called Red Ventures. Mm-hmm. And I believe that they basically took the keyboard away from him. So he's no longer allowed. No one from TPG is ever allowed actually to respond to me publicly.
No kidding.
Again, I think it's somewhere in their training manual that I am not allowed to be engaged. Which is
that would be amazing.
Like that is like the badge of honor of my life. Like, right. I'm really thrilled whenever I've helped somebody take an amazing trip or do something cool, but getting to that level of making them look like knobheads has been like a great highlight in my career. So
that's awesome, dude. And for the record, for anyone that is that will be listening to this, it's not that yeah. It's not as though if you see an affiliate link on a travel blogger website that it means like they're a scumbag, don't ever talk to them. It just means that the possibility exists that what they are telling you in order to get you to sign up for that card may or may not be truthful.
And I think
you really don't know.
And I think that's where, repeat readers get a feel for it, where, I do cover those things. I do have affiliate links, of course. That's how I make a living and how I provide for my family. But you get a feel for like, okay, if he's saying this, maybe it's actually a thing, because he doesn't usually say things like this for just no good reason. I'm not giving you like 19 more reasons to get that card that I told you 18 more reasons about last week. It's like, there's a limit to it. But if it's like 140,000 points for doing fuck all, right, it's going to get you 3 nights somewhere amazing. Like, you should do that. And I don't see any problem with me getting paid if you do that, because of course I disclosed that we do get paid for some of these things. And so I think it's just, the more you get to know a blog or a blogger, the more you get a feel for like, are they pushing it? Are they redlining it just for money? Or is there some kind of greater purpose and sense to all this? And, we try to never be greedy. Like, I think to me, having people happy makes the rest of the business go well. So.
Right. And it's funny too, because like, to your point, I think that it's hard to identify if, someone is coming from the perspective of like, look, I'm just trying to help. And if that means I make 50% less money than someone who is not, might be trying to help sometimes, but other times just sort of trying to funnel you into the most profitable thing for me.
Yep.
I think the unfortunate aspect of that is that it usually, like you said, it takes some experience to be able to discern who's doing that. And so I would imagine that like the bigger ones, like obviously like Points Guy, and like when you're just sort of Googling like, how to blah, blah, blah with points, it's like, that's probably the first place you're going to stumble upon. And so you're going to end up with the newest design. Like the newest people are going to,
they don't care about community or repeat visitors. They care about funneling first-time searchers, so that when somebody listening to this podcast says, oh, they mentioned Chase Sapphire Reserve, they're probably going to be the first thing that comes up.
Right.
You're going to read their quote unquote review. And then if you apply from their link, they're going to get $300. And, and it's kind of like a big spiraling washing machine. But yeah, so it's a tough one. They eventually get to, it's a game of scale. But I'm never trying to be number one in the world. I think that's a fundamental difference, is I'm not trying to be like Jeff Bezos of travel.
Right.
Like, I just want a nice seat at the table that is fairly comfortable and good glass of wine next to me or something. So
yeah. And there's plenty of room for that, as I have discovered, as a photographer, because one of the conversations that has become kind of a theme of this whole thing is that anyone in any sort of a creative space, and I would consider you in that as well, because you are a writer. And obviously you have to think very creatively in terms of like how you can orchestrate these things to your advantage, is that you don't have to be the most talented, number one, and you don't necessarily have to be the best business person either. But if you can be good on some level at one or both of those things, there's what, 7 billion people out there. If you can get the tiniest little fraction of listeners or fans or whatever, I mean, you can still have millions of people that say, yeah, I don't know, it's the way he, styles his hair or whatever. Like, just, that's the dude, and I'm just going to follow that guy. And it is what it is.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, I consider myself very lucky. Like, I dropped out of college. I did well in school, but I never took it as seriously as I could have. But I, through my work, have been able to write thousands of words for huge publications, as like they're like, will you please write something for us? And I know people who went to journalism school who can't get those gigs. And so to be able to do those things is very amusing. I'm doing like a college lecture next week. I didn't finish college. So that's always like, that's like, so,
right.
It's like, I think, like you said, you don't have to be the best. You just have to find an angle, find a niche, try to say it in a way that maybe somebody else hasn't said before, or in a way that maybe creates clarity that inspires more people. And for me, I've just always tried to keep it simple. It's not a big secret, but I've always written my blog under the perspective of writing to my dad, basically. He's a very brilliant guy. He's a lawyer, but he does not care about loyalty programs or, acronyms and stuff like that. So for me, it's always just been, how can I write this so that I'm not insulting him, because he's obviously incredibly intelligent, but he doesn't know what PQPs and EQMs and, RDMs and like, how do I explain to him that like RDM means like redeemable miles, like, and, like all these things, so that hopefully I can bring him into the conversation rather than just alienating him like many people I found have done. So that's always been my slant. And that was kind of the niche that I tried to carve out. And sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not, but, but yeah, I like it. I can sleep at night.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. I remember one of the first things that I encountered when starting to research this was the acronym just obnoxiousness. And then of course, like one of the first places I went to was Flyer Talk, which of course is a great resource. Don't get me wrong. However,
also like the snake pit of the world is like
oh
the
my
meanest
God.
bastards ever.
Oh my God, dude. It is the Reddit of travel. Absolutely. Yeah. It's like
you will get torn apart for asking the simplest question.
Yep. And it happened to me.
I'm not very liked on there because I tell them they're all trolls and dickheads, but
well, they are. I mean, it's like
self-fulfilling prophecy. But.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many threads there have been on which is the best linens, and should I book this flight because of the fucking flatware on the, and it's just like, holy shit, like you guys have totally lost. I mean, this is insane.
Yeah, it's perverse.
And I remember, I think I might have like asked you to review it or something, but when I was like tinkering with like, oh, maybe I could be like a travel blogger. And of course, like I could not commit to it, man. It's like, I think I wrote like 8 or 9 articles. And then I was like, I think I've said all I wanted to say. And it was like, I realized that to get past that, it was like, I was going to need to heavily be researching and involved every day. And I was like, I wasn't as interested, I guess, as I thought that I was, but
you're not alone.
it's hard to keep up, dude. I don't know how the hell you do it.
It's funny because everybody is like, I think so many people are like, oh, like I've got all this knowledge, I'm going to start a travel blog. And usually the first article they end up writing is how to get upgrades on flights, and then, like a few like that are very, and then like by week 2 or 3, it's just like, okay, I have run out of creative steam. And it's understandable because frankly, like so much of it is fucking boring.
Right.
It just is. And then a lot of it just revolves around continuing to travel and the changes in travel, like the news element of it. But yeah, it's a funny one because I've definitely seen that before. And if I don't pride myself on anything other than the fact that I'm still here.
Yeah. Well, hey man, I mean, you grinded it out, dude, and you're still doing it. I mean, cause it's been a while, like it's been a while that you've been doing it. And, but what I was going to say was that I wrote this article and it was all about like the ridiculousnly of like all the acronyms and stuff. And I remember at some point I said something about like, I like had some like manufactured sentence that just consisted of like the most acronyms. I was like, and I wrote like, how fucking pretentious is this that like anyone should actually, speak this way. And I found that everyone on Flyer Talk was like that. It was like, it was like, oh, you're a new person with a question. Well, I'm going to amp up the acronyms just because I know that you're going to go, well, what does that mean?
You actually need a glossary just to like sort through anything. It's shocking.
Yeah. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of good. I mean, it's the internet. There's good people and there's bad people or whatever. So I got plenty of good stuff out of that. But I mean, I think like you were definitely a huge reason that I took some of the trips that I took. I mean, at least I don't want to give you 100% credit because I had to think critically as well. But I mean, a big portion. I think, I don't remember if this is true, but I think when we went to Southeast Asia, you wrote an article that was talking about like how a lot of the trips to Southeast Asia were going to become like twice as expensive very, very soon. And I think you were the first one that alerted me to that. I think it was with using American Airlines miles.
Yeah.
It was like, I don't know, like 4 years ago, it was like all of these trips are going to be double very soon. And so that was pretty much the impetus that because we were like, should we go back to Africa this year? Should we go somewhere else? And it was like, hey, you know what? We can go right now and only for the next, few months to Southeast Asia, first class for like the same cost as going to Africa. Like, I don't even think it was like business class at the time or something. So it was like just a no-brainer. We wanted to go there anyway.
I think that's one of those things that people listening should realize is that points are not savings accounts. They do not mature. They do not ever become more valuable. They only become less valuable. So the sooner you burn the miles, the better. And Asia was one of those things that was particularly for US-based frequent flyer programs. Nobody ever really looked to use them that far away. They typically spent them for intra-US flights or Europe and stuff. So there are these really great values out there that were really sweet for a long time, but eventually people started to cotton on to it and, they raised the rates. But so you got to get on these things while you can. That's the gist.
Yeah. So do you think that or have you heard any murmurs about maybe what might happen with like redemptions in the future? Like, is it possible that they might go down for some period just because we've got to spur travel somehow? Or like
the thing they do now is flash sales. Like Delta is a good example where they'll have a monthly or bi-weekly or weekly kind of promo where they'll put a certain number of cities. Let's say it's like Barcelona and Brussels will be the two where you need fewer points than usual. But that's just like, it's on their terms. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing. Other than those kind of like limited time flash sales, which they do, like Air France does them, but again, only to like a handful of destinations, and Singapore does that same thing, but they're monthly, they're on their terms. Other than that, it's going to be pretty much the same for a long time.
Yeah. And I guess like we were saying before, maybe the risk of it actually being more difficult if it turns into this whole, like you said, like a classist kind of system.
Yeah.
Well, on one hand, that would obviously be shitty. On the other hand, for somebody like you, that could actually be even better in terms of, because people are going to need to know even more. How the hell am I going to be able to pull this off? Because most people, and I even think that people that can afford to go on really amazing trips, I think that whether you can afford it or not, most people just aren't going to if it costs them that much money. They just don't see the value of travel like people that are just all about travel do. And so I think more so than ever, if this does become the type of thing where, hey, we're only letting a set amount of people into this country or whatever it is, or, hey, there's significantly less routes that will actually go here. And so therefore the award seats are going to be far more limited. People are going to need to look to somebody like yourself to be like, how the hell am I going to get here? I know there's a way. There's always going to be a way. It's just going to be harder. And most people are not going to be willing to do the research on their own.
Hope so. We can hope.
Yeah.
Right now, that's all we got.
Right. Dude, by the way, how did you end up in the UK? How did that go down?
My wife is from the UK. We live not far from where she grew up. And yeah, love it here. When I'm home, it's great. Lately, I'm home a lot, but it's very peaceful, very quiet. And
when you're home in the UK?
Yeah. We lead a very wonderfully boring lifestyle, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah. You're not in the city anymore, or?
No, just outside. Yeah. So very easy access if we need to get in, but also nice park about 50 steps from where I live, and take it pretty easy.
Yeah.
Can't beat it. I honestly love it here. It's one of the few like silver linings for us right now with this whole COVID thing, is we've just had such a nice time together, daily walks in the park and keeping it basic and good access to all the little things. So yeah, it's a cool place. You're welcome anytime.
Oh, that'd be awesome, man. I would love to oblige on that as soon as as soon as things get normal.
Obviously, you're not allowed right now. Well, you are actually allowed. You can come to us. Most Brits can't come to you right now. But
well, I'll tell you what though. If the Iceland thing seems to make a lot of sense. I mean because that's kind of been on the menu for the two of us for a while. It's a fantastic landscape photography destination for one thing.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like,
I bet.
I mean, there's like a few places in the world that just always seem to, they're like cliches basically. And I think probably New Zealand might be number one. Like that might be the one that's just every photographer. And then there's some other place. There's like Patagonia. There's like the Dolomites.
Yeah. Those are the places where I wish I invested in a camera, but then I go to buy one and I'm like, okay, maybe other things that I'll buy. But
yeah, it's not even just the camera. It's the time, spent learning about everything. But Iceland, for being a place that's not that far away, is like kind of it's like the diet version of New Zealand, I think, in a lot
ridiculous.
of ways. So yeah, and being that it's like a 5-hour flight from the East Coast, something like that.
Yep. Not even.
So
it's a great place to go, and if it's the only place it's got the doors open, then even better.
Right. And if you can book it all the way out to January or February, that's Northern Lights season as well.
Absolutely. That's something special.
One of the guys I had on a couple episodes ago is a comedian from New York who right now lives in Iceland, and so he's quarantined in Iceland, and he was like, I love it here. But being quarantined here is like another level of like, it's like if you can't do that much and you're in Iceland, it's an odd place to be.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a different culture, I think it's great to see because of the landscape, but then when you realize how unique the people are because of like their history of, things like, whaling and how they live and their cuisine and everything. It's so different that I think it's a wonderful experience for anybody outside of just the beauty. So I'd say it's a must for anybody listening.
Totally. Yeah. It's definitely, I'm getting motivated in this conversation to maybe look into going over there. Although honestly, I think if I were going to go to Iceland, I would just pay, I think I would just pay to go. I don't know that I would, do like an award ticket. Cause it's not that far.
I wouldn't. It's a short flight. You can stomach economy if you need to. And it's usually pretty cheap, especially when they've had like discount airlines going maniac kind of style there. So
yeah. Well, listen, man, I want thank you again so much for coming on, dude. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
One more question, man. Do you have any other like bucket list places where you're like, I haven't been here yet and I don't know how the hell I haven't gone here?
Yeah. So there's this one place, I'm glad you asked, called Explora. It's like the Explora Hotel in Patagonia. And it just looks like something out of a Bond movie. Like it looks like where the villains would be staying, and Bond's got to like find a way to get in. And it's so expensive. It's like just eye-watering thousands of dollars per night. But I'm like, I'm doing this sometime. This has to happen.
Right.
So that's like the big one for me, where I'm just like, okay, this is going to be a must. We're going to do it one way or another. So that for me is the one. Otherwise, I have been kind of everywhere. Very lucky in that way, especially now that who knows what'll be available or how soon. So yeah, wild.
That reminds me of what is it? The underwater hotel. I think there's two of them. There's one in, I think like Dubai maybe. And that are like 50 grand a night or some ridiculousness.
Yep. Out of my league for now.
Yeah. Hey, you never know. Keep pushing it. Keep making those articles.
We'll get there selling some credit cards. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. All right, man. Well, dude, thanks again so much, man. I really appreciate you coming on, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you. Pleasure, man. Talk to you soon.